Well, we as adults are very familiar with these images of children covered in dust from bombings and raids. We are familiar with the stories of people crossing borders in the Middle East trying to find a country that will take them in. We're familiar with refugees from Syria fleeing for Europe. We've heard the stories of Angela Merkel in Germany having to pay a political price for opening her borders without limitations. And we've heard the debates here in the United States about how many should we take? Should we screen them? What should we do with them? Some countries want to open their borders, and some countries are so afraid of possible terrorism or people who simply don't look like them, don't worship like them, that they want to put, even in the midst of human genocide, really strict rules in place as to who we will take, who we will help. And this is despite videos of towns and neighborhoods that are being devastated from the ground and even from the air. Just yesterday, we had another terrorist shooting in Istanbul, Turkey. 39 people at last count killed. And so as people flee the devastation of war, the specter of genocide, we are haunted by the faces of these innocent and traumatized children. Their faces are without smiles. You know the one picture I'm talking about, the little boy whose picture went viral. His soul just looks empty. He's been stripped of any sense of security and of any sense of peace. No warmth, no assurance, no hope, really. It's incomprehensible to us in America as we sit here, back from our holiday dinners and cookies and presents, that children would face such horrors. Little Hayden is sitting there just happy as a bug in a rug in his little seat. We can't imagine that little face facing such horrors. And yet we have faced such horrors throughout the collective history of humankind. Some of us have more or less personal experience with war, with the stories of refugees. I've spoken about one of my heroes before, Eva Moses Kaur, who is the mother of one of my brother's best friends. Eva Kaur was a twin. Eva Kaur is Jewish. Eva Kaur survived the experiments by Dr. Joseph Mengele at Auschwitz. When Auschwitz was liberated, she was 11 years old. And Eva Kaur's picture as a child is one of the iconic images from World War II. She is one of the children in the front of a picture in their striped little prisoners' uniforms with a face just beginning to light up. Her sister was weaker and more frail than she, and Eva tells the story that she literally willed herself to live because she knew that if she didn't, her sister certainly would not survive. Mrs. Kaur now travels the world telling people about what she experienced as a child during the Holocaust. She has a museum called Candles in my hometown of Terre Haute, Indiana. I was on the board of that museum for a while. Mrs. Kaur has recently been in the hospital. She's in her early 80s now, but is still fighting the good fight and telling the story and using those images of not just refugees, but victims of the world's most horrific genocide to remind us that we can never again go that way. When I was a little girl, I remember a picture of a young Vietnamese girl on TV running after her city had been bombed with napalm. You probably remember that story. She's running, naked with her hands up in the air, screaming. And now, this year, the picture of this little Syrian boy. Well, in the first century, this megalomaniac King Herod decided that it was better for his own security that he issue an edict to kill all the boy babies under the age of 2. It's known in some circles as the slaughter of the innocents. Megalomaniac is probably an understatement for Herod, who was himself half Jewish, the tetrarch, as they called him, of Judea. His job was to serve Caesar and simply to keep the Jewish people calm. That's why he built the beautiful temple that Jesus grew up worshiping in, because he wanted them to have a place to worship. He wanted these conquered people, when they returned from the diaspora around the world, when they came to their festivals in Jerusalem, to be calm and quiet, simply worship their God and go home. The idea that a king would be born threatened his sense of security to his very core. And when the Magi came, he inquired of the scribes and Pharisees what this prophecy was about, and was angered to learn that the child would be born in Bethlehem. His response was to kill children. They weren't able in this day and age to vote people out. They weren't able in this day and age, the Jews weren't, to raise an army to conquer the Roman government. The Bible tells us that weeping and wailing was heard. Can you imagine having a child under 2? Government comes, government that has conquered your people, and kills any male child under the age of 2. Lots of crazy stuff has happened around the world in 2016, not the least of which, although we've not had war on our shores, we've certainly continued to see mass shootings, horrific signs of discrimination and torture. We have had a presidential election cycle that has simply defied explanation. And many of us are now wondering, what next? In the last few days of 2016, more celebrities died, like suddenly, in their 50s and 60s than I can remember. I lost 3 people that I knew and loved just in the last week alone. My friend Lynette, my cousin Jim, who served with us on our infamous family reunion committee, and my dear friend Rose lost her mom after a long bout with cancer. 2016, good riddance. 2016, goodbye. And yet, we have enjoyed wonderful things: births of babies, weddings, new houses, healings, bigger and better events, exciting things happening in our professional lives, the hope of things to come. When we say goodbye to an old year, we're always looking forward to a new year. And the one thing that Joseph and Mary, the perhaps petrified parents of this little boy, no longer a baby, the one thing they had was the promise of God. The promise that no matter what it looked like, no matter what the circumstances might be, that God was still with them. God had, after all, promised each of them in their own way. In Luke, Mary is told that she will give birth to a child who will reign on the throne of his father David. Joseph is given the promise that he will name this child Jesus, because the baby will save his people from their sins. Can you imagine Mary and Joseph going, so God, we're not going home, we're going to Egypt, and then when we're leaving here, we can't go back to the city where we intended to live because it's still not safe. I think Andrew's question was kind of illuminating. What happened to Jesus when he got to Nazareth? Was he safe then? Those are the kinds of questions children ask, because children, most of the time, never have to question safety. Most of the time, we as adults don't have to question safety. And yet there are people here in our own metropolitan area who don't let their children sit outside on the porch for fear of a bullet. They don't let their children go to the parks. There are some people who won't even ride public transportation with their young children for fear of being shot. And so in this world where danger is all around us, in a world where people are dealing with tough stuff, what does God give us? God gives us His Spirit, His presence. God has given us a Savior, and God continues to give us hope. I'm sure that Mary and Joseph, as the Bible says, Mary pondered these things in her heart. I'm sure that they continued to question why these turns of events kept happening. And yet, deep inside, they had to have had a faith, unlike any that most of us have ever known, to live out this life's journey, not knowing what the next day would bring, but somehow knowing that within the life of this child, the germ of hope could not and would not die. Jesus was a child refugee. Think about that. Forced to flee his home country to avoid the rage of genocide. His parents had no idea when they would be able to return home, and when they did return, they made their lives in a new place. So many people around our world are doing just that. And so many countries are so afraid of these people who have been ravaged, who have been stripped of everything, every memory that they have. On this first Sunday in 2017, I hope that you will bring with you into this new year what Mary and Joseph and the child Jesus had. And that is hope. That cliche that says hope springs eternal is true, and we must cling to it. The weeping prophet Jeremiah writes in Lamentations that God's faithfulness is great and that His mercies are new every morning. Every day, every week, every month, every year, we as Christians are undergirded by a hope that only God can give. Even as we look around us and question decisions that others make, we question the treatment of people. We wonder how doctors can refuse health care to people simply because they are transgender. We wonder how judges can enforce such discrimination. We wonder how we cannot just take care of each other. We've tried in our own way in this church, through the leadership of the Andersons, to reach out to children who have known the devastation of disaster. The money that we send every year to Belarus helps to fund an orphanage where children who have been impacted by health impact of the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl are able to live and have shelter and food, and even to go to camp for 10 days in a year. It may not be much, but it gives those kids some hope. It lets them know that someone cares about them. And if you look in our fellowship hall and down the hall, you'll see their handprints of thanks and gratitude. Just saying thank you. It's a little bit of hope. We are seeking for what is new, for what is good, for what will be exciting in the year ahead. And no matter what you faced in 2016, God's hope is with us. 2016 may have been a wonderful year for you. I have experienced some challenges, as you all know, in my professional other setting. I personally was happy to see 2016 say goodbye. But I am always mindful that God has new mercies every day. He offers hope for peace, for safety, for success, for love, and for joy. And He offers a challenge too, that we as His people might stand in the gap for those whose hope has been compromised, that we might stand in the gap and offer hope and love and welcoming and support to do what we can so that those who face disaster, that those who face poverty, those who face homelessness, those who face hatred will know the love of God And how will they know? They will know because we have shown the light of God into their small corner of the world in whatever way we can. Every offering that we make, be it to our church or to the region or to Week of Compassion, every service that we give, be it through PADS, the homeless ministry that we participate in, through our back to school fair, through our In As Much Fund, where we seek to help those right here in our own church, even working with our children week to week, greeting visitors. We don't know what people bring with them when they walk into these doors. We don't know what, "Hi, it's good to see you," will mean to someone. We don't know what they've been through. We do know what God is able to do. And so I ask you to remember that in the midst of difficult seasons, in the midst of a year which holds we do not know what, that Joseph and Mary traveled the Middle East with the hope that God would keep his promises, with faith that God would be all he had promised to be to them. Joseph and Mary's road was not easy, but oh, what a joy it must have been to raise that little boy. Despite the things that later happened, what a joy it must have been to see God keep his promises in ways they had never imagined. I hope that's what your year brings for you. The joy of seeing God keep his promises. The joy of seeing God keep you and protect you and comfort you and love you in ways that you could never have imagined. It's not all going to be easy, but with hope, we can put one foot in front of the other, keep our heads lifted up, and give thanks to a God who will never leave us. Great is his faithfulness. And remember each day of this year, his mercies are new and fresh and full and real every single day of the year. Amen.